When my daughter told me to either serve her husband or leave the house, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply picked up my suitcase, nodded once, and walked away from the very home I bought with my life savings. She expected me to beg, to collapse like I had so many times before. But this time, I didn't break. This time, I was already 10 steps ahead. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need to hear them, those who've given everything for their family, only to be pushed aside when they're no longer useful. What unfolded over the next few weeks wasn't an angry father's revenge, it was a man reclaiming his dignity, piece by piece, with quiet determination. And what started as a walk out the front door would soon become a lesson in consequences legal, financial, and emotional for those who mistook kindness for weakness. If you've ever been taken for granted by those you love most, you'll understand why I couldn't let this one slide. And if you've ever wondered what happens when the silent provider finally says enough, then keep listening. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. My keys were still warm in my palm when I opened the front door, grocery bags biting into my wrists. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting a golden glow across the living room. Normally the kind of light that would make me pause, take a breath, feel at home, but not today. Today, it all felt like a stage I no longer belonged to. There he was, Ethan, sprawled out in my leather recliner like a king on his throne, feet and socks propped up, a half-drunk beer swinging from 2 fingers. He didn't even glance my way. "Grab me another while you're up," he muttered, eyes fixed on the television where a basketball game flickered. I set the bags down slowly, the red lines on my hands from the plastic handles pulsing with each heartbeat. "Excuse me?" I said. "You heard me. Something cold. Not that cheap beer you drink. Get one of the imports I like. Something sharp twisted in my chest." I'd bought that very beer for him, with my own money from my Social Security check. The kind of beer I wouldn't drink even if someone offered it to me for free. "Ethan," I said quietly, "I just walked in. Let me put these groceries away." Finally he looked up, wearing that same smug, dismissive look I'd seen so many times before. "What's the big deal? You're already on your feet. I'm comfortable." He emphasized that word like it was a virtue, like his comfort meant more than mine. "The big deal is," I replied, leveling my voice, "this is my house." His feet hit the floor with a dull thud, and he stood up tall, broad, puffed out like a rooster trying to intimidate a shadow. "Our house, actually. Julia and I live here. We pay the bills." I raised an eyebrow. "With whose money?" "Details," he snapped, taking a swig. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, William. You want to stay here, you do what I ask. Simple as that." At that exact moment, the kitchen door swung open and Julia appeared, hair pulled back in a messy bun, dish towel over her shoulder. She took in the scene. Ethan standing over me, voice thick with threat. Her eyes narrowed, not at him, but at me. "What's going on?" "Your dad's making a big deal out of nothing," Ethan said. "I asked for a beer, and now he's acting like I insulted his ancestors." Julia turned to me, already exhausted, already done with the conversation before it even began. "Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth making a fuss." I stared at her, searching her face for any flicker of the girl who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms. But there was nothing left of that little girl, only a woman who had learned to look past her husband's arrogance and expect me to do the same. Ethan stepped forward, closer now, close enough for me to smell the alcohol on his breath. "Here's how it's going to work, old man. You live here, you contribute. That means when I ask you to do something, you do it. No attitude. No questions. Our house," he repeated. "That's right," Julia added, coming to his side like a loyal foot soldier. "Dad, you need to decide. Either you help Ethan, or you can pack your things and leave." I looked at them both, letting the silence stretch long enough to make them fidget. Then I smiled, soft but certain. "All right," I said. Ethan's smug grin returned. "Good, now about that beer. I'll pack." The look on his face, satisfaction, turned to confusion. Then panic was almost cinematic. Julia's jaw dropped, but no words came. I turned and walked toward the hallway, leaving the bags untouched. Behind me, I heard Ethan's breath hitch, and Julia whisper, "Dad, wait." But I didn't. My steps echoed against the hardwood floors. The same ones Martha and I had sanded and polished together 20 years earlier. In the bedroom, I reached for the suitcase on the top shelf of the closet. It landed on the bed with a soft thump. I'd bought that case for our honeymoon, back when life still felt endless. Now it sat open like a mouth waiting to swallow what was left of my life in that house. I packed with purpose. A few shirts, some pants, socks, medications, reading glasses. Not everything, just enough. I wrapped a photo of Martha in a clean t-shirt and slipped it into the side pocket. Outside the door, I could hear their muffled argument, Ethan's voice rising, Julia trying to calm him down. Too late. I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway. Neither of them tried to stop me. Ethan had returned to the recliner but sat up straight now, alert. Julia hovered near the kitchen, arms crossed tightly over her chest. No goodbye. No apology. The Buick started without hesitation, loyal to the end. I didn't bother looking back. The house would be fine without me. But they wouldn't be. The 30-minute drive to the motel gave me time to think, but I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying already, mostly in silence, mostly in the dark. That chapter was closed. And as I pulled into the faded parking lot of the Sunrise Motor Inn, the neon sign flickering above like some kind of cosmic wink, I knew something with perfect clarity. They thought I'd just disappear. But they had no idea what I had planned next. The room at the Sunrise Motor Inn smelled faintly of lemon-scented disinfectant and old carpet, but it was clean, and for now it was mine. A bed, a chair, a lamp, a desk by the window. Sparse, quiet, temporary. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, letting the silence settle around me, not the warm quiet of a family home, but the sterile stillness of a space no one expected to live in. I pulled out my phone and opened the contacts list. Years of banking left me with numbers most people never bothered to memorize: accounts, agents, insurance representatives, loan officers. I didn't need a to-do list. The next steps had already written themselves. My fingers moved across the screen with purpose. First call, the mortgage company. The account ending in 3902, linked to 27 Rosewood Lane, my house. Good afternoon. This is Melissa. How can I help you today? She asked, her tone cheerful, oblivious. I need to cancel an automatic payment, I said. Mortgage for 27 Rosewood Lane. I'm the account holder. A pause. Sir, I see that payment has been active for over 4 years. Are you sure you want to discontinue it? Completely sure. May I ask the reason? The occupants no longer qualify for financial assistance, I said, carefully choosing my words. There was no anger in my voice, only finality. She confirmed the cancellation and said I'd receive written documentation within 3 business days. Good. I wanted a paper trail. The second call was easier. My auto insurance policy covered 4 vehicles. My Buick, Julia's compact, and Ethan's oversized SUV and motorcycle. Hi, I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy. The agent rattled off my list. Which ones? The 2017 Honda Civic and the 2020 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Will the drivers be moving to their own policy? They will. Effective when? Today. I didn't bother informing Julia and Ethan. Let them find out the hard way, when the DMV letter arrived, or when roadside assistance didn't come. The credit cards were next. Julia had been an authorized user on 3 of my accounts: Visa, MasterCard, and the retail card for Hanover's department store. I'd been paying balances I didn't create for years. Mr. Tran, removing an authorized user means they won't be able to make new purchases, the representative explained. But you're still responsible for the existing charges. I understand, I replied. Do it. Each call removed another invisible chain. Insurance, gone. Mortgage, gone. Credit access, revoked. One by one, the financial lifelines I'd extended out of love were snapped back into my control. No more quiet deductions from my pension. No more swiping cards I didn't carry. No more pretending it didn't hurt. I opened my laptop, logged into my banking dashboard. The screen lit up with numbers. Checking, savings, retirement accounts, all still intact, still breathing under the weight of a lifetime of restraint and frugality. I began organizing documents, account statements, insurance policies, legal forms, Everything labeled and stacked in folders on the motel desk, like a general mapping out a war strategy. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was focused. I was reclaiming my life. I shut the laptop and stepped outside for air. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few beat-up trucks and a dusty sedan. A couple walked past me, their arms linked, chatting about dinner plans and weekend chores. I envied their simplicity, the ease of having a partner who shared burdens instead of adding to them. Martha had been like that. We never had much, but we had each other. We balanced each other. She would have never let things get this bad. She would have spoken up before I sank this deep into quiet resentment. Back in the room, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Unknown number. I let it ring out, then played the message. "Hi, Dad. It's Julia. I think something's wrong with the mortgage. The bank left a voicemail saying they didn't receive this month's payment and I don't know what's happening. Call me?" I didn't. The next one was Ethan. "Clark, my car insurance is screwed. They're saying I'm not on the policy anymore. You need to fix this. People are asking questions." I smiled faintly and deleted the message. Then another. This time Julia again, more frantic. "Dad, I just got a letter from the credit card company. I don't understand." "Did you take me off the accounts?" Ethan's freaking out. "Please, just call me so we can talk this through." I poured myself a glass of tap water and let the messages keep coming. 12 by the end of the day. Then 16. Then 22. The tone shifted from confusion to anger to desperation. Julia's voice cracked with stress. Ethan's grew more aggressive, borderline threatening. "You can't just pull the plug like this, Clark," he snarled in one message. "You're making us look like deadbeats. You want people thinking you're the victim? You're not." Oh, but I was. And now, for the first time, I wasn't playing the part of the silent one who swallows his pride. Now I was telling the story the way it had always been, with receipts, with facts, with undeniable truth. By Sunday night, I sat at the motel desk once more, reviewing a full list of confirmation numbers, cancellation notices, and new passwords. I'd changed it all, locked down every account, rerouted every statement, cut every tie that could be used against me. It wasn't vengeance, it was liberation. They thought I would crumble. They thought they could demand my obedience and still drink my beer, sleep under my roof, drive cars insured in my name. But I wasn't their servant. I was their father, and if they had forgotten what that meant, then they were about to learn. The next chapter was already underway, and I was writing it one decision at a time. By Monday morning, the silence on my end had become louder than any argument I could have thrown their way. I knew they were unraveling by the hour, wondering how their tidy little life held together with invisible threads of my sacrifice had started to fray. I let the messages pile up. 22 voicemails, most from Julia. Her voice trembled somewhere between panic and disbelief. "Dad, please. The bank says we owe the full mortgage payment by Friday or they'll start foreclosure. They said there's no auto payment set up anymore. I don't understand, why are you doing this?" Then Ethan, spitting venom, calling me every name but the one I earned. "You're seriously going to ruin your own daughter's life over a beer? You're pathetic. Grow up, Clark." I didn't respond to that either. They'd mistaken years of patience for weakness. But I wasn't weak, I was just tired of carrying people who were perfectly capable of walking. By Thursday morning, the motel's front desk called to say I had visitors. I looked through the peephole before unlocking the door. Julia and Ethan, both looking like they hadn't slept in days. She wore a sweater that looked like it had been balled up in the back seat of a car. He looked even worse unshaven, yittery, red-eyed. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Julia spoke first. "Dad, we need to talk." Ethan jumped in immediately, voice raised, fists clenched. "You're trying to destroy us? Over what? Some ridiculous misunderstanding? You're acting like we kicked you out on the street. Didn't you?" I asked, voice steady. "You gave me a choice. Serve your husband or leave." I left. Julia stepped forward, eyes glistening. "We didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. You just didn't think I'd call your bluff." Ethan scoffed. "Okay, fine. Maybe we were harsh. But that doesn't justify you wrecking our lives. We've got bills, responsibilities." You can't just disappear and yank the rug out from under us. Actually, I said calmly, I can, and I did. Because it was never your rug, it was mine. I watched Ethan's face turn red, his temper bubbling just under the surface. What about the mortgage? The credit cards? You've left us completely exposed. Then it's time to learn how to stand on your own, I said, like I did when I was your age. You've had 3 years of a free ride, living in a house you didn't pay for, eating food I bought, driving cars I insured. That ends now. Julia reached for my arm, her voice breaking. Dad, please. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like fog. A small, well-timed bomb she hoped would detonate guilt inside me. I didn't flinch. Congratulations. When did you find out? Last week, before all of this. Have you seen a doctor? Not yet. Appointments next week with Dr. Myers. Good, I said. Have her call me if there's a medical emergency. I'll help with real needs. But I won't be manipulated with announcements you think will change my resolve. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Ethan shifted beside her, arms crossed. You're choosing pride over your family. No, I said quietly. I'm choosing dignity. Something you both seem to have forgotten. They left not long after, Julia whispering, I'm sorry, Ethan muttering threats under his breath. I closed the door, locked it, and sat back down at my desk. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop. Evidence. If this was going to get uglier, and I had no doubt it would, I needed documentation. I called Bob Harrison, a former colleague from the bank, someone I trusted. Bob, I said, you told me a while back that you'd seen something odd from Ethan. He didn't hesitate. Yeah, a few months ago, he came in trying to get a home equity loan on your property. Said the house belonged to him and Julia. Had documents too, looked legit, but didn't check out when we pulled the title. Full fraud. You still have the paperwork? I flagged it. Kept it on file in case it came up again. Want a copy? Please. Clark, Bob added, voice tightening. That man's dangerous. Not just careless strategic. He wasn't borrowing out of desperation. He had a plan. Probably still does. I thanked him, hung up, and stared out the motel window. For months, maybe years, Ethan had been plotting to take my house, quietly filling out forms behind my back, forging ownership on paper. Not a spontaneous mistake, but a calculated move. I drove to the county courthouse that afternoon, filed formal eviction papers under my name. The clerk reviewed the deed I'd brought. Sir, are you aware this is your daughter's residence? It's my house, I replied. They've violated our agreement. No rent, no respect, no contribution. She stamped the notice. 30 days. If they contest, there'll be a hearing. Otherwise, the sheriff serves them directly. It felt like signing the final page of a contract, one I should have never agreed to in the first place. Next stop, the police department. I met with Detective James Ortega, who listened carefully as I explained Ethan's past attempt at loan fraud and his growing aggression. Ortega nodded. We've had reports about Ethan's gambling. Glacier Ridge Casino. Poker, mostly. Lost close to $20,000 over the past year. That would explain the desperation, I said, and the charm offensive when he thought I might be his bailout. Ortega made a few notes. There's something else you should know. Ethan's been researching adverse possession laws, squatters' rights. He asked a lawyer last month if 3 years of continuous occupation could help him make a claim. I felt the breath leave my lungs. Can he? Not legally. Montana requires 5 years without the owner's permission. Since you invited them in and they never paid rent, he has 0 standing, but it shows intent. The restraint order was filed by noon the next day. Ethan was officially barred from coming within 500 feet of me, my new residence, or my property. The sheriff's department delivered it within 48 hours. That evening, a text came through from an unknown number. This isn't over, old man. I forwarded it to Ortega, added it to my file, then blocked the number. Ethan had crossed the line from disrespectful to dangerous, but now I had the law on my side. He couldn't touch my money, my house, or my peace. He'd lost control, and men like Ethan, when cornered, always made mistakes. I just had to be ready to catch them when they did. The town of Fairmont wasn't big, just wide enough to stretch from a diner at one end to a post office at the other, but it had its own rhythm, its own way of digesting news. Word traveled fast, especially when there was drama involved. And there's nothing like a well-placed scandal to stir small-town curiosity. By Friday morning, I realized it was time to take control of the story, before Ethan twisted it any further. My first stop was the post office. Mrs. Carla Henderson from the church mailing committee was there, predictably hovering near the stamp machine. She spotted me before I even stepped through the door. "William Tran," she said, tilting her head and narrowing her eyes like a detective about to crack a case. "I've been hearing things." I smiled politely. "Have you now? They say you left the house. That there's trouble." Her voice dipped like she was revealing state secrets. I chose my words carefully. "Julia and Ethan asked me to move out, so I did. They wanted to handle their responsibilities as adults." She blinked. "They asked you to leave your own house?" I nodded. It seemed like the best thing for everyone. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "But didn't you pay for their wedding? And the house?" I said nothing. The facts spoke louder in silence. The look on her face said enough she'd be retelling that conversation to half the congregation by Sunday. My next stop was Kowalski Hardware, where I'd worked part-time after retirement. Tom Kowalski was behind the counter, fiddling with inventory sheets. "Heard you moved into Sunrise Motor Inn," he said. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Needed some space." "It true you paid their mortgage for 3 years?" he asked, voice quiet now. I glanced around. A few employees had gathered nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. "And their groceries," I said. "Utilities, car insurance, Julia's student loans, her wedding." "Dave," the assistant manager muttered under his breath, "Ethan told everyone his parents were loaded, that they were paying for your expenses." I raised an eyebrow. "Ethan says a lot of things that aren't true." Tom's face darkened. He always seemed to have money for new clothes, expensive lunch orders, but never picked up weekend shifts. "Makes sense now. You were footing the bill." By the time I left the hardware store, I knew the story was already shifting. Not through yelling, not through drama. Just the truth, spoken plainly, letting it echo through the town's well-worn channels. At St. Peter's Lutheran Church, I found Pastor Gabriel Reynolds preparing the sanctuary for Sunday service. He welcomed me with a warm handshake and ushered me into his office. "Several folks have approached me," he said gently. "They're worried about you." I appreciated his directness. Gabriel wasn't one to fish for gossip. He wanted facts. "For 5 years," I began, "I supported my daughter and her husband. Financially, emotionally. I paid for everything so they could build their life." I paused, then added, "Last week they made it clear that unless I obeyed Ethan's orders in my own home, I had to leave. So I did." He leaned back, his face solemn. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was clarifying," I said. "Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences they've spent years avoiding." He nodded. "Sometimes it does." I stopped at Annie's Cafe on the walk back. The place was busy, filled with retirees, off-duty workers, and the usual Friday afternoon crowd. I sat at my usual corner table and listened. "Did you hear Ethan's out of work?" someone whispered near the window. "Gambling debts. Clark Tran paid all their bills," someone else chimed in. "Ethan's been telling folks he was taking care of him. Can you believe that?" The murmurs swirled around like a rising wind. I didn't need to say a word. I just sipped my coffee. Then my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor for over 20 years. "William, I hope I'm not intruding," she said, voice full of concern. "I just wanted to let you know there's been shouting at your house. A lot of it. And yesterday the police drove by twice. Thank you for keeping an eye on things," I said. "Are you safe?" she asked. "Do you need anything?" "No, ma'am, I'm all right." That evening, a message came through from Marcus Bell at Capital Recovery Associates. "We're trying to contact Ethan Tran regarding a delinquent account," the voicemail said. "We have reason to believe he resides at your property." Another creditor. Another thread in the unraveling sweater. I forwarded the voicemail to my file. Ethan had clearly used my address on multiple credit applications. He'd positioned me as his financial firewall, hoping I'd never notice. I updated my documentation, sorted the audio files, printed summaries of every creditor's call. I should have expected them to fight back, but Saturday morning proved just how desperate Ethan had become. First, Tom from the hardware store called. "William, You need to know Ethan was here earlier, loud as hell, saying you abandoned him and Julia, told everyone you had some kind of breakdown. What else did he say? Claimed you're mentally unstable, that you're refusing to help with a family emergency. The lies were piling up now, flimsy and transparent, but I knew what this was. Ethan was trying to muddy the waters. If people couldn't tell who was telling the truth, maybe they'd stop asking questions altogether. Then a call came from Detective Ortega. William, just a heads up. Ethan filed a complaint for elder abuse. Said someone at your bank manipulated you into making erratic financial decisions. I laughed, actually laughed. He really filed that? He did. But he doesn't have a leg to stand on. No medical diagnosis. No legal authority. We're not pursuing anything unless there's credible evidence. Less than an hour later, Julia called again. Dad, please pick up. There are things you don't understand. Her voice was drenched in emotion. I'm pregnant. The stress is making everything worse. The doctor says I need to avoid conflict. I kept my tone even. Congratulations. What did Dr. Myers say specifically? I haven't seen her yet. Appointment's next week. That's fine. I'll call her office. If there's a real medical issue, I'll help directly. Her voice sharpened. You can't just call my doctor. Then have her call me. I'm not refusing to help with a real crisis, but I won't fund a manufactured one. She hung up. The next hour, I walked into downtown Fairmont and saw Ethan outside the bank, holding court in front of a crowd. He's losing it, Ethan was saying. Senile. He kicked out his own pregnant daughter. Abandoned us. There's something seriously wrong with him. He didn't see me until the group fell silent. I walked up calmly. How's the gambling debt, Ethan? I asked. His face blanched. Glacier Ridge Casino. Around $20,000, right? A few in the crowd murmured. Pieces were clicking. You're insane, he barked. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, and so do your creditors. They've called me. They've visited the house. I've redirected them to your employer. Oh, wait. You lost that job too, didn't you? His face went purple with rage. You bitter old man. I supported you for 5 years. Rent, insurance, food, cars. Can you account for your paycheck? The onlookers began pulling out phones, recording. Ethan backed away. This isn't over, Clark, he growled. No, I said. For you, it's just beginning. As he stormed off, the crowd remained, watching me. One by one, they nodded, and I knew, without a doubt, that the truth was winning. Slowly, yes, but undeniably, and Ethan's house of lies was beginning to collapse under its own weight. The motel room door rattled softly against its frame that night, not from wind, but from footsteps outside. Steve Brennan, the night manager, knocked a moment later. He was a retired Army sergeant with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor you learn to trust instantly. Mr. Tran, he said, that son-in-law of yours was here again, pacing in the lot, muttering about teaching you a lesson. Stood outside your door 5 minutes before leaving. I've got it on security video if you need it. I nodded, not surprised. Keep the footage safe, Steve. The police will want it. He gave a curt nod. Guy like that shouldn't be messing with older folks. I'll back you up however I can. After he left, I sat on the bed and stared at the suitcase I'd never unpacked. Every night here was proof of how far things had gone, but also how far I was willing to go to protect my dignity. By morning, I was back at the police station with Detective Ortega. He slid the USB drive into his computer and watched Ethan's silhouette pacing, glancing up at my door like a wolf circling prey. Ortega leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. This is escalation, William. Between this footage, the restraining order violation, and the public confrontation at the bank, we have more than enough to strengthen your case. I'll move for an expedited hearing. He scribbled notes, then looked up. There's one more thing you should know. Ethan's lawyer contacted us Friday. He was asking about adverse possession laws. I stiffened. Squatters' rights? Ortega nodded grimly. Montana requires 5 years of hostile occupation without the owner's permission. He's only got 3. But the fact he's even researching it shows intent. He's been planning long-term to take your property. I sat silently for a moment, letting it sink in. Ethan hadn't just been disrespectful. He'd been executing a strategy for years, hiding behind Julia's smile and my patience, while scheming to steal the very roof over my head. "Does he have a case?" I asked finally. "Not legally," Ortega said. "Permission kills hostile occupation, and he's never paid property tax. He has no claim. But it proves something important: he's desperate, and desperate men make mistakes." That same afternoon, Ortega walked me to the courthouse. The judge signed off on a full restraining order. Ethan was now legally prohibited from approaching me or my property within 500 feet. Violation meant immediate arrest. The paper felt heavy in my hands, not just words, but a shield. By the time I left, I already had my next step in mind: Ethan's creditors. They'd been calling my phone, sending letters to my address. He'd listed me as a guarantor, hoping I'd shoulder the fallout. I dialed the first number, Frontier Credit. "This is Mr. William Tran," I said. "I need to clarify something regarding Ethan Tran's delinquent account. He does not live at my residence. He has no ownership interest in my property. I have evicted him. If he listed me as his address, it's false information." The agent thanked me, noting the file. I made 5 more calls that day, each one the same: brief, factual, final. I wasn't paying Ethan's debts, but I wanted the record straight. He had no legal tie to me. By noon, I'd severed that last thread of imagined obligation. I sat back in my chair at Annie's cafe, sipping black coffee, when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then played it later. Ethan's voice, low and venomous. "This isn't over, old man. You'll regret this." I smiled faintly and forwarded it straight to Ortega. Let him add it to the file. Meanwhile, Fairmont's rumor mill was working overtime. At the diner, people whispered not about me, but about Ethan, about the gambling debts, about the fake loan documents, about Julia's complicity. At the grocery store, I overheard one man mutter, "Can you believe William paid their mortgage for years? And Ethan still tried to steal his house?" Truth had a way of settling into people's bones. You couldn't stop it. You could only delay it. Saturday afternoon, Julia called again. This time I picked up. Her voice was ragged. "Dad, Ethan lost his job. The dealership let him go. They said the rumors were affecting business. The debt collectors keep coming to the house, knocking at all hours. He's falling apart." "What about you?" I asked. "Where do you stand?" She hesitated. "I don't know. He says we can leave town, start over somewhere else, but I don't know if I can." "You have to decide who he really is, Julia, not who you wish he was." Silence stretched on the line. "What about the house?" she asked finally. "It's going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. The paperwork's already filed. 3 veteran families will live there." Her gasp cracked through the line. "Dad, why? Why would you give it away?" "Because I need to know if there's anything left between us beyond inheritance, beyond money. I want a relationship built on respect, not expectation." She began to cry softly, but I didn't fill the silence. She needed to sit with it. That evening I parked across from my old house, watching from a distance. The blinds were drawn, but I could see shadows moving sharply inside Ethan's arms, flailing, Julia shrinking away. Mrs. Rodriguez waved from next door, her face worried. Later that night, Steve texted from the motel. He tried to get in again. I told him about the restraining order. He left, furious. I forwarded it to Ortega. Ethan was unraveling, and with each unraveling came another piece of truth revealed about his character, his lies, his intentions. I knew what would happen next. Men like Ethan always ran. When cornered, when stripped of easy money and protection, they packed up and disappeared. The only question left was whether Julia would go with him or finally stay behind to face herself. By Monday morning, the restraining order was stamped, filed, and effective. Ethan's options had shrunk to nothing. Job gone, debts piling, reputation ruined, access to my money severed. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I poured my coffee, looked out at the sunrise over Fairmont, and knew I had chosen dignity over servitude. And no matter what storm Ethan stirred up next, I was ready, because storms eventually pass. But dignity? That remains. By Wednesday, the storm had turned into a full-blown hurricane around Julia and Ethan's lives. I could see it from a distance, debt collectors circling, neighbors whispering, church members piecing together the truth like detectives at a crime scene. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt a calm resolve. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about drawing lines that should have been drawn years ago. Still, there was one piece left undone. Julia, my daughter. The little girl who once braided dandelions into crowns and demanded bedtime stories about brave princesses. The woman who had stood silently beside her husband while he humiliated me in my own living room. I needed to know if there was anything left of the girl I'd raised, or if she'd been swallowed whole by Ethan's shadow. So I called her. "Julia," I said when she answered. "We need to talk. Just the two of us. Without Ethan." Silence stretched long on the line. Then, quietly, "I can't leave him right now. He's not doing well." "Then we have nothing to discuss," I replied firmly. "The restraining order prevents me from being near him. If you want to see me, it will have to be without him." She hesitated. "Where?" "Main Street Diner, 2 o'clock, back corner booth." I arrived early, as I always did. Old bankers' habit time is respect. I chose a booth with my back to the wall, facing the door, watching as townsfolk came and went. At precisely 2 o'clock, Julia walked in. She looked older than her 30 years. Stress lines around her eyes, dark circles beneath them. She slid into the booth across from me, clutching her purse strap like a lifeline. "Dad," she began immediately, voice cracking, "I know you're angry, but things are falling apart. Ethan lost his job. The debt collectors won't stop calling, and now the sheriff has served him papers for the restraining order. I don't know what to do." I let her words tumble out like stones spilling from a bag. Then I leaned forward, speaking softly but firmly. "I'm offering you one chance, Julia. One chance to end this with dignity." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Public acknowledgement of the truth. Full disclosure. Everything I've done for you and Ethan over the past 5 years. And an honest explanation of why I left." Her cheeks flushed red. "You want me to humiliate myself?" "No," I corrected. "I want you to tell the truth." "There's a difference." She looked away, blinking hard. "What kind of acknowledgement?" I had rehearsed this in my mind for days. On Sunday, during testimony time at church, a letter to the editor of the Tribune, and a Facebook post visible to all our mutual connections. Full details: college tuition, wedding costs, mortgage payments, car insurance, and the ultimatum that forced me to leave. Julia stared at me, her coffee untouched. People will think, I interrupted, "that you had a father who loved you enough to sacrifice his retirement for your comfort, and that you repaid him with ultimatums and demands. That's not humiliation, Julia. That's honesty." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't soften. I couldn't, not this time. "What about Ethan?" she whispered. "Ethan is no longer part of any equation involving me. The restraining order is permanent. If you choose to stay married to him, that's your decision. But it means choosing him over me." Her lower lip trembled. "You're asking me to choose between my husband and my father. I'm asking you to choose between a man who threatened me and a man who raised you." She said nothing, staring down at the table as if the Formica surface could provide answers. "And the house?" she asked finally. "It's going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative," I said. 3 families of veterans will live there. The will has already been changed, signed, and filed. Even if you do everything I've asked perfectly, the house will never come back to you. That decision is final." Her eyes widened in shock. "Why?" "Because I need to know that any reconciliation between us is based on love, not inheritance." For the first time, real tears spilled down her cheeks, not the rehearsed kind, not the manipulative kind. "I'm sorry, Dad. I never meant for things to go this far." I leaned back. "Sorry isn't enough anymore. The whole town saw you stand by while Ethan treated me like a servant in my own home. Words won't change that. Only actions will." Her shoulders slumped. "What if I can't do it? What if I can't stand up in front of everyone and admit how wrong we were?" "Then you'll live with the consequences," I said simply. "Ethan will run. He always does. You can go with him and keep pretending, or you can stay here and rebuild your life with honesty." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And if I do it? Then maybe, over time, we can build something real between us, not based on money, Not on guilt, but on respect between two adults. She dabbed her eyes with a napkin. How long do I have to decide? Sunday morning, I said. Church starts at 10. If you're not there, I'll know you've made your choice. Julia rose slowly, clutching her purse strap. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at her, really looked at her. Past the exhaustion, past the fear, I caught a flicker of the girl who once raked leaves beside me and handed me dandelions with pride. Forgiveness and trust are different things, Julia. I forgave you the day I walked out instead of fighting. But trust has to be earned back, one honest action at a time. She nodded, silent tears streaming, then turned and walked out of the diner. I stayed seated, staring at the empty booth across from me. Sunday was 4 days away. By then I would know whether my daughter had the courage to choose truth over comfort, responsibility over loyalty to a man who had never deserved it. As I left the diner, the crisp autumn air hit my face like a wake-up call. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift. The decision was no longer mine to make. It was hers. And by Sunday morning, the whole town would see where her loyalty truly lay. Sunday morning dawned sharp and cold, the kind of day where the sky was so clear it almost looked brittle, as though one wrong breath might shatter it. I walked to St. Peter's Lutheran with steady steps, my breath visible in the frosty air. Word had spread quickly. Small towns are like that, and by the time I pushed open the sanctuary doors, I knew the pews would be fuller than usual. People weren't just there for worship. They were there for answers, for the truth that had been circling in fragments all week. I slipped into my usual seat, 3 rows from the front, trying to appear calm, though inside my chest my heart drummed like a warning bell. Pastor Reynolds began with the familiar rhythms, hymns sung softly, readings delivered in his deep baritone. But the room was restless, every head turning slightly at each creak of the back doors. Everyone knew something was coming. When testimony time arrived, a silence fell heavy across the sanctuary. Then, from the very back, Julia stood. For a moment she looked impossibly small, dwarfed by the aisle stretching out before her. Her hands trembled at her sides, but her steps were steady. The whispering began almost immediately as she walked forward. Her name passed between lips, speculation thick in the air. At the podium, she gripped the edges like a lifeline, looked out at the faces she'd known her entire life, and took a deep breath. I need to tell you all something about my father, she began, her voice wavering but audible. The sanctuary went completely still. For the past 5 years, my father, William Tran, has supported my husband and me financially. He paid nearly $150,000 for my education when I could have gone to a state school. He gave us $18,000 for our wedding when Ethan's family couldn't contribute. He gave us his family home, the house his parents left him, where he lived with my mother for 2 decades. When we couldn't make mortgage payments, he paid them. When we needed groceries, utilities, insurance, he covered it all. While he lived on Social Security, we lived off his sacrifices. A ripple of gasps spread through the pews. She continued, her voice gathering strength. 3 weeks ago, when my father wouldn't obey Ethan's demands like a servant, we gave him an ultimatum, obey or leave. And my father chose to leave his own home rather than surrender his dignity. Tears rolled down her cheeks now, but she kept going, the words tumbling out as though she'd been holding them back for years. I stood by while my husband disrespected the man who raised me with love and patience. I chose loyalty to someone who threatened him over loyalty to my own father. And I was wrong. Ethan was wrong. My father deserved gratitude, respect, and love. Instead, we gave him ultimatums and demands. She looked directly at me then, her face blotchy with emotion, but her gaze steady. Dad, I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I'm hoping it can be a start. For a heartbeat, silence. Then murmurs of support, hushed affirmations, a few audible amens. Pastor Reynolds stepped forward, eyes glistening. Sometimes the hardest courage is admitting our mistakes publicly. Julia has shown that courage today. And William has shown us what dignity looks like under pressure. After the service, the sanctuary became a blur of faces. People came up to me with handshakes, embraces, words of support. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my hand so tightly I thought she might break it. We all suspected you were helping them, William. What we didn't know was how much. How they treated you after all that. I'm so sorry. Tom Kowalski clapped my shoulder. That took guts, both of you. Setting boundaries isn't easy when family's involved. Their sympathy warmed me, but the moment that mattered most came outside, under the church steps where the cold air bit sharp. Julia approached, hesitant but determined. The letter to the Tribune will run Wednesday, she said softly. The Facebook post goes up tonight. I'll make it public. She paused, her eyes brimming again. Ethan left yesterday, packed his truck and disappeared while I was at work. No forwarding address. No note. I wasn't surprised. Men like Ethan always ran when the walls closed in. I'm sorry your marriage ended this way, I said. She shook her head. I'm not. I filed for divorce this morning. Found out he'd been using my credit cards for gambling without telling me. The debts are even worse than I thought. Her voice cracked but then steadied. I need to start over, and I want to do it honestly this time. Months later, I stood in the front yard of my former home, now unrecognizable. The Montana Veterans Housing Initiative had transformed it into 3 apartments for veteran families. The paint was fresh, the yard landscaped, a playground installed in the back. Children's laughter floated through the air as families carried boxes inside, beginning new chapters of their lives. A young mother, Sergeant Maria Santos, shook my hand firmly. Mr. Tran, this opportunity means everything to us. Thank you for choosing veterans for this gift. Veterans understand sacrifice, I replied. This house should belong to people who earned it, not people who took it for granted. Watching the children race to the swings, I felt lighter than I had in years. My own life had settled into quiet peace at a lakeside cabin I'd purchased with money no longer siphoned into someone else's comfort. Mornings with coffee on the deck overlooking the still water. Afternoons fishing from the dock. Evenings reading as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Simple pleasures, once denied, now mine again. One crisp morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Julia. Dad, I'm 3 months into counseling, learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we try having coffee sometime? I want to earn your trust back, one conversation at a time. I looked out at the lake, where an osprey dove into the shallows and rose triumphantly with a fish in its talons. I smiled, typing back. Coffee sounds good. Saturday morning at the diner. Her reply came almost instantly. I'll be there. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me completely. I set the phone down, listening to the distant laughter of the veteran families moving into their new lives in my old house. Justice had been served, dignity had been preserved, and maybe, just maybe, a daughter was finally ready to rebuild, not with guilt or expectation, but with honesty and respect. It had been a long, hard road, but as the sunset painted the lake in golden fire, I knew one thing with perfect clarity. It had been worth the wait. The first Saturday after Julia's public confession, I arrived at Main Street Diner 15 minutes early. Old habits die hard, bankers are never late. I took the same booth where we'd last sat, back corner, my seat facing the door so I could watch whoever came in. I ordered coffee and sat quietly, letting the steam curl upward, listening to the murmur of conversations around me. The diner was a Fairmont institution, cracked red vinyl seats, walls lined with framed photos of Little League teams, veterans in uniform, and county fairs long past. It was the kind of place where everyone noticed who came in and who sat where. That suited me fine. I wanted people to see that Julia and I were meeting again. I wanted them to see that change, if it came, was public, not hidden in whispers. At 2 minutes past 10, Julia walked through the door. She looked nervous, clutching her coat tight around her shoulders, her eyes scanning the room before locking onto mine. She came over slowly, sliding into the seat across from me. Hi, Dad, she said softly. Hi, Julia. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress came by, poured her coffee, and left without a word. Julia wrapped her hands around the mug like it might anchor her. I wasn't sure you'd really come, she admitted. I raised an eyebrow. I gave you my word. Unlike some people, I still keep mine. She flinched but nodded. I deserved that. I didn't reply, letting the silence stretch. Finally, she took a deep breath. I've been going to counseling 3 times a week. It's hard. Harder than I thought. But I'm learning things about myself, about why I let Ethan control so much of my life, about why I stood by while he disrespected you. Her voice trembled, but she pushed forward. I know saying sorry doesn't fix it. I know actions matter more. That's why I wanted to meet here, in public. I wanted people to see that I'm not hiding anymore. I studied her face. She looked younger somehow, stripped of the brittle defenses she'd built around herself when Ethan was near. Vulnerable. You told the truth at church, I said finally. You wrote the letter. You posted online. That was a start. But rebuilding trust takes more than public statements. It takes consistency, day after day. She nodded, biting her lip. I know. I don't want to lose you forever, Dad. Then don't, I said simply. But understand something. This isn't about me forgiving you. I already have. Forgiveness is easy. Trust? That's earned, slowly, with time. She looked down at her coffee, then back up at me. How do I start earning it? By living differently, by being honest even when it hurts, by taking responsibility for yourself, not waiting for someone else to rescue you, and by proving through actions, not words that you value, respect more than convenience. She swallowed hard, then whispered, I can do that. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee. Around us the diner bustled, clinking dishes, murmured conversations, the occasional laugh. For once I didn't mind the noise. It felt alive, grounding. Julia finally spoke again. Ethan called me last night, from an unknown number. He wanted me to join him. Said we could run away, start fresh somewhere else. He promised things would be different. And? I asked. She shook her head firmly. I told him no. I told him I filed for divorce, that I wasn't going to chase him anymore. He hung up on me. Relief flickered through me, though I kept my expression neutral. That was the right choice. Her eyes shimmered with tears. I should have made it years ago. I should have protected you instead of him. You can't change the past, I said gently, but you can shape what comes next. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not just about Ethan or the debts, but about small things, her classes at college, memories of Martha, even the garden we used to keep in the backyard. By the time we stood to leave, something had shifted. Not healed, not yet, but shifted. A bridge had been rebuilt, plank by plank. Outside, the air was crisp, sunlight glinting off parked cars. Julia hugged me tightly before we parted. Thank you for giving me another chance, she whispered. Thank you for taking it, I replied. Over the next weeks, Julia followed through on her promises. The letter to the Tribune ran front and center, a detailed, unflinching account of the years I'd supported them, the ultimatum I'd been given, the dignity I chose instead of submission. The Facebook post gained traction, hundreds of comments from townsfolk expressing support, admiration, even apologies for believing Ethan's lies. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Fairmont wasn't whispering about my supposed breakdown anymore. They were whispering about Ethan's betrayal, his debts, his cowardice. Julia became something of a symbol herself, not of failure, but of redemption. People stopped her at the grocery store to thank her for telling the truth. She started volunteering at the church pantry, stocking shelves and serving coffee, insisting she wanted to contribute instead of consume. Meanwhile, Ethan's world continued collapsing. Creditors traced him out of state, one rumor saying he'd been spotted in Reno, another that he was working odd jobs in Billings under a different name. None of it mattered. He was gone, a ghost of bad choices and broken promises. The restraining order kept him far from me, and I doubted he'd risk violating it again. At my cabin by Lake Sheridan, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Coffee on the deck at sunrise, fishing in the afternoons, evenings with a book by the fire. Sometimes Julia came by, bringing groceries or just herself, sitting with me on the porch in comfortable silence. Each visit was another step, another plank on that bridge. One evening in late spring, she arrived with a small box. "What's this?" I asked as she handed it over. "Counselors suggested I start keeping a gratitude journal," she said. "This one's for you. Every time I come over, I'm going to write something I'm thankful for about you." I opened the box. Inside was a simple, leather-bound notebook, the first page already filled. "Thank you for teaching me that real love isn't about what someone gives you, but about the respect you show them. My throat tightened. I closed the notebook carefully. That's a good start, I said quietly. She smiled, and for the first time in years it reached her eyes. By midsummer, the transformation of my old house was complete. 3 veteran families had moved in, their children filling the yard with laughter. I attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, standing alongside the mayor and the director of the housing initiative. Julia stood beside me, proud. When a reporter asked why I donated the property, I answered simply, because veterans understand sacrifice, and because sometimes the best way to honor a home is to fill it with people who will appreciate it. The applause that followed wasn't for me alone. It was for the journey, for the lessons learned, for the quiet resilience of truth. That night, Julia and I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over the lake. She turned to me, her voice soft but certain. Do you think we'll ever get back to what we were? I shook my head gently. But maybe we'll build something better, something honest. She leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hope, not the fragile kind, but the sturdy, weathered kind that comes after storms. The road had been long, painful, and filled with loss, but it had led here to dignity, to peace, to the possibility of reconciliation. And as the last light of day faded across the water, I knew with certainty some endings are really beginnings in disguise. Autumn settled gently over Fairmont, painting the trees in fiery shades of red and gold, as though nature itself wanted to remind me that endings could be beautiful. Life at the cabin had found its rhythm, quiet mornings with steaming coffee on the porch, afternoons casting a line into the lake, evenings reading until the fire burned low. For the first time in decades, my money was my own, my time was my own, and my peace was mine to protect. Yet, even in that peace, I knew one truth. The story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Julia, about whether the seeds of honesty she'd finally planted would take root or wither. She came to the cabin often, at first shy and tentative, then with growing confidence, as though each visit was another layer of armor she shed. Sometimes she'd bring dinner simple meals she cooked herself instead of relying on takeout. Sometimes she'd bring nothing at all, just herself and her stories about work, counseling, or the new friends she'd made at the church pantry. Each time, she left a note in the gratitude journal she'd started. The entries piled up like bricks in a foundation. Thank you for teaching me to stand on my own feet. Thank you for showing me that boundaries are love too. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. One afternoon, she brought over a manila folder. It's finalized, she said, placing it gently on the table. Inside was her divorce decree, stamped by the county clerk. I scanned the document, noting how Ethan's name looked strangely hollow on the page, like the ghost of a bad decision finally laid to rest. I'm free, Dad, Julia whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. It feels terrifying, but also good. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Freedom often feels that way at first. It's the price of building something real. Oh. Meanwhile, the town had not forgotten. Fairmont thrived on stories, and ours had become the cautionary tale whispered over grocery carts and discussed after church services. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that made people sit straighter, think harder about the way they treated their parents, their children, their spouses. I heard it in passing. Did you hear about William and his daughter? He gave her everything, and she let her husband run him out. But she told the truth, made it right. For once, the truth wasn't buried under lies. It was standing tall in daylight. The Montana Veterans Housing Initiative thrived, too. Every time I drove past my old house, I saw children's bikes scattered on the lawn, flower pots lining the porch, flags fluttering proudly from the stoop. The laughter of those children, free and unburdened, was sweeter to me than any inheritance I could have left Julia. I didn't regret my choice for a moment. It was a house reborn, and in its rebirth, I found my own. One crisp Saturday, Julia joined me for coffee at the diner. She wore a light sweater, her hair pulled back, her face softer than I'd seen in years. Over pancakes and eggs, she said, "Dad, I've been thinking. I want to go back to school. Finish my degree. Not on your dime, on mine. I'll work. I'll apply for grants. I'll figure it out. But I want to prove to myself that I can do it without leaning on anyone else." Pride swelled in me, though I kept my voice steady. That's a good plan. You'll learn more from earning it yourself than I ever could have taught you by paying. She smiled faintly. I think I already have. Weeks passed, then months. Winter crept in, blanketing the lake in frost, turning the trees bare. At Christmas, Julia came to the cabin with a gift. She handed me a small wrapped box, nervous. Inside was a framed photograph of Martha, the original tucked carefully from an old album, restored and reprinted. I thought she should be here too, Julia whispered. I swallowed hard, emotion catching me off guard. She always is, I said softly. We spent that Christmas by the fire, the trees small but cheerful, the air warm with possibility. Julia read aloud from the gratitude journal, now half full, her voice steady, proud, unashamed. Each entry was a marker of growth, of truth reclaimed. For the first time in years, I believed we might actually find our way back, not to what we were, but to something new. Ethan never returned. His shadow faded from Fairmont, leaving only rumors of debt and disgrace trailing behind him. That was his story to carry now. Not mine, not Julia's. She belonged to something else. A story of stumbling, of breaking, but also of standing again. One evening, as the snow fell outside the cabin window, Julia asked me quietly, "Do you think Mom would be proud of me, after everything?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the frightened woman who had once parroted her husband's cruelty, but a daughter slowly finding her own voice. "Yes," I said firmly. "Not because you never made mistakes, but because you faced them, because you told the truth. That takes more courage than never falling at all." She cried then, not from guilt this time, but from release. And I let her cry, the way I had when she was a child, back when her biggest fear was a thunderstorm outside her window. Only now, the storm had been inside her all along, and she was finally learning how to weather it. As the fire crackled low and the snow fell heavier, I realized something that had eluded me all these years. Dignity isn't just about saying no when someone tries to trample you. It's about teaching others, especially those you love, that they can find their own dignity too. Julia was learning. Slowly, imperfectly, but learning. And that was enough. The past had been scarred with betrayal, lies, and ultimatums. But the future? It glowed quietly, like embers waiting to spark. We couldn't rewrite what had been done, but we could choose what came next. And as I closed the gratitude journal that night, the last entry reading, "Thank you for teaching me how to be honest with myself," I knew this chapter wasn't about endings anymore. It was about beginnings, hard-won, fragile, but real. The house was gone, given to families who understood sacrifice. Ethan was gone, consumed by his own failures. But Julia remained, not as the daughter who betrayed me, but as the woman who finally stood up and reclaimed her truth. And as for me, I had my peace, my cabin, my dignity, and maybe, just maybe, the chance to walk beside my daughter again, not as her provider, not as her safety net, but as her father, a man she could finally respect. In the quiet of that winter night, I looked out at the snow drifting across the lake, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Not just peace, not just dignity, but hope. Hope that even broken families can be mended, that even shattered trust can be rebuilt, one plank at a time. Hope that the truth, once spoken, has the power to heal. And with that hope burning steady inside me, I closed my eyes, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. And that brings us to the end of today's story. If you've been moved by what you've heard, if it made you think about family, dignity, or the value of standing your ground, then don't let this be the last time we share a moment together. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now so you never miss the next story. Every week we bring you powerful, thought-provoking narratives about life, choices, and the consequences that shape us. And while you're here, take a second to like this video. It's a simple way to show your support and help us reach more people who need to hear these lessons. I'd also love to know your perspective. What part of today's story resonated with you the most? Do you think you would have made the same choices in William's shoes, or handled things differently? Leave a comment below and let's start a conversation. You'd be surprised how many people out there share your thoughts and experiences. So once again, don't forget, subscribe, like, and comment. It costs nothing, but it means the world to this community we're building together. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.